There are two questions that I think are very important to ask yourself when mixing. And at the same time, I think it's important to not think so much when working and to be in a state of flow. But at the same time, we do need to have some sort of dialogue in the back of our mind. And the first question is why? And I think it's a very important question because it has so many layers to it. You know, it will stop you from over-processing things. It will guide you on your path to your vision. When I learned to mix, I spent a lot of time reading interviews with people like Michael Brauer, you know, and these big dudes. And I would read that he's using this kind of compressor on the vocal or this EQ. And then I would copy that, you know, in my mixes, which is a natural thing to do when you're starting. But at some point, I started thinking more about the why. And why am I doing this? Because even though that compressor sounded great from Michael Brauer in that song, it doesn't mean that it's going to translate into your song. And the question of why is super great because it forces you to think more about what it is you're trying to achieve. So every time I reach for any plugin or any piece of hardware, I will always have 5 or 6 different acceptable answers to that question. So it could be like, why am I compressing this vocal? And the answer could be, well, I want to add more grit to the vocal, or I want to hug the vocal tightly together, or it could be, I want to push the vocal forward. And in each of these questions will lead me to a different tool, right, in my toolbox. So I know if I want the vocal to be more aggressive or more explosive, I know that that compressor will do a good job, you know. But at the end of the list, I will always have the answer, I don't know. And if I ever get to that answer, then I simply step back and I don't do anything. And to me, that is one of the sort of secrets of mixing, if there is such a thing as a secret. The moment you get to the point where you can step back and not do something, that's the moment when you're leveling up. Because the opposite is simply throwing lots of plugins on by default, even if you don't know why you're doing it, and perhaps because you saw somebody else do it online. And the second question should always be how. Because now you know why you're doing something. You might be adding an EQ on your vocal because you know you want to make it brighter. But one of the simplest truths in mixing is that there are always many ways of achieving the same thing. So if you want to make your vocal brighter, adding a top end to that vocal may not be the best approach always. Because you could also just back off on the low end, or you could use parallel compression or saturation to make the top end, you know, shine a bit or pop out. When you do that, you're actually learning more because you're comparing different solutions. So the two questions of why and how are very important. But of course, you also need to know where you're going with your mix. So you can have some sort of vision to compare with where you are now. And then you need to have the path leading to that vision with these kind of questions as your guide.